Welcome to another episode of the Gap Down Backer podcast. Today we have a very special guest. We have Coach Kenny Simpson with us today, the author of many books and the head football coach at Searcy High School in Arkansas. Coach, how you doing?
Man, I'm great. I appreciate you having me on, and I love the graphics and the Gap Down. I love the idea of the podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Before we get started into we talked off screen about this. I mean, you just released your fourth book, Coaching Football Like a Basketball Coach. Do you want to kind of just give a brief description for anybody listening, kind of who doesn't know what that is or might be interested in the book?
Sure. Yeah. No. Wrote several books during quarantine. I've still got several kind of in the works during the off season. That's what I like to do. But this one basically talks about football being a fluid game. Making adjustments. Basketball coaches are experts at that. I coached basketball for a few years before. I did both, and then I went football route. But the way they make quick adjustments, the way they see the game, that's starting to trickle over into football. No matter what offense you run, it's starting to be where you have a conflict player and you kind of have an if-then. Well, basketball coach has been doing that for hundreds of years, it feels like. And so kind of explores that offensively and defensively, creating matchups, creating space. And so that's a big part of it. The other thing basketball coaches do so much better, I think, than football coaches is they're able to get such great, deep relationships because they have less kids. And so it kind of explores the aspect of how to, as a football coach, try to do that with 60 kids. A basketball coach only has 12. So what are some things you may be able to do to create those relationships? So it's really it's not a negative connotation towards football coaches. I love it. I coach football. But there are some things we can learn kind of from our brothers over there that do basketball.
Oh, that's awesome, Coach. And then let's just kind of hit straight into it and kind of build from there. Is you took the Searcy job, in May, right? That's
actually late June.
Late June, okay.
July. Yeah.
Late June or going into July. Obviously, it was a stressful year with COVID as it is, but you didn't take any assistants with you. So how was that process of let's start with teaching your assistants, because obviously you have a system on both sides of the ball. You have stuff that you brought with you that you've done very well at other places, Southside primarily beforehand. What was the process of hiring and teaching your new assistants your systems?
Well, you had to hit the ground running in July. And so as a coach, I had to kind of prioritize, okay, what is the most important thing we've got to get done? And then you have to evaluate the staff on hand. What were they very strong at? Fortunately for me, I moved into a very good staff. These guys are very good. They're very talented, and I'm very blessed to work with them. And so on the defensive side of the ball, we had a guy who'd been a defense coordinator for probably 20 years. Well, I'm not going to force my system there. We're in July. You roll with what you've been doing. It's very comparable to what I was already doing. The kids know it. We got a game in 6 weeks, so I'm not going to, force that down there. Offensively, I went in with the open mindset. I was okay to even run what they had been running and slowly migrate towards where I wanted to get. But the talent we had there kind of dictated going towards the gun tee. And so to me, it made sense for us to run that this year. We ran some kind of adjustments to it. We may talk about later on, but that fit our kids. I felt it gave us the best chance to win. So that's kind of where I came in and evaluated, went through. We left our strength program as is. Now we're in off season now. So now all that stuff will be tweaked even more and kind of meshed into what I want it to become. But to me, defensively, I didn't touch anything. I thought those guys knew what they were doing. I had a pretty good conversation with the defense coordinator. I felt from several people he was a great guy. Tony McCoy, you live in Arkansas, he's kind of a guru of defense. So that was a blessing for me. Hiring coaches, found two good young ones, one already on staff and brought one in that really were hungry to move up the chain. And so gave them special teams with how I wanted things to look. I've got some unique things that I want to do in special teams, and say, hey, look, as long as we hit these things, it's yours. And they did a great job with it. One of the things I learned from going from kind of a smaller school to a little bit bigger school is you do have a little more experienced coaches. Usually at the 6A level, these guys have been doing it for a while. These guys had just come off winning a state championship. So I didn't doubt they knew what they were doing. It was just kind of getting the system I wanted involved. Offensively, it was much tougher. It was much tougher because now you're teaching, a very different style. So the offensive line coach and I had a lot of great conversations, slowly getting this stuff put in. We actually kept one of their run plays. They were a big inside zone team. I never thought I would turn in my gap down backer card, I guess, but we ran some inside zone because they already had it in. And then we worked hard to get in the other runs I wanted. We actually kept a lot of their pass concepts because their quick game, a lot of their quick game stuff matched what I wanted to do, and the kids knew the terminology. So why mess with a good thing? So it kind of turned into a blend of what they had done and what I had done. And that was kind of a give-take relationship. When you have 6 weeks to get ready for a game, you kind of have to do that. And as the year went on, we were able to get a little more of what I wanted in and realize that some of the things they were running matched their kids better. And so we migrated towards that.
Now, you mentioned terminology there. How much did you maintain and how much did you change, would you guess, based just percentage-wise overall?
From like the gun tee system we put out quite a bit. We run game-wise, a lot of it is the same terminology. We do have different tweaks, and I do that every year. If you put out a book that has your offensive terminology, you better have other words each year because other people are buying that. So
Yeah.
Every year we're going to have little tweaks on how we call things.
Sure.
But the run game-wise, we kept a lot of the terminology I wanted, and I adapted a lot of the terminology in the passing game that they had. So I'm still in week 3 calling the wrong pass, and the guys are correcting me. Because I know what I want, but I've got to get their verbiage.
You sound like our quarterback coach there. We hired a new quarterback coach this year, and he'd been at the same school for about 30 years. And so he comes and we kind of mesh what he wants with what we wanted to do and had. And it was still like week 4 or 5 and he's still calling some of this stuff his old stuff as prior school. It's just it happens. When you do something for so long, it's just hard to change that.
It's simple things, we had a word at Southside for run that play again real quickly, and the word was different at Searcy. Well, I kept what they knew, but I would call it the wrong thing about 3 times. And finally, I picked up on it as we went. But it made it easier. It's easier for one guy to learn something than for 60. So that's kind of was my mindset.
And you got to do it. Nick Saban has. I remember. I forget what coordinator it was. He would always talk about. He goes, my play calls. They were the same play, just different terminology. He said, but Nick Saban said, you got to call it my terminology. Even if it was on offense. The offensive coordinator had like a translation of what he wanted to call. And so he would say, all right, I want this, match it with what Nick Saban terminology was and call it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And that's this offseason, I think we'll work towards where it's much more of a blend. Of course, now I don't have 6 weeks. I have 8 months to play a game.
Now, next thing I want to kind of hit into is the practice because I think that's probably what a lot of us wing T people are fascinated when we watch your stuff because you put out just tidbits here and there, either both from on your YouTube channel, which will be in the bio for people, because I know you had to make a new one because of email issues, and but your buck sweeps drills, and I know you do a lot of interesting things with pods and how you break up your practice. Let's start with first, how much different from what they did before you got there to what you brought here practice schedule-wise? How much did that morph? How much did you adapt to kind of some things they wanted to do that they had success with prior? How did that look?
Well, a lot of the changes really were just due to more kids. At the 4A level here in Arkansas, most of our kids went both ways. Now, we tried to only start, maybe 3 or 4 kids both ways, but both of them, your backup guard might be your starting nose tackle. When you move up, you have more kids, and so for us, we didn't have a lot of 2-way players. So right there is a huge change. It's a great change. As a coach, you can go an hour and a half and feel like we've been out here all day when your kids are going one way, and so that alone was an adjustment for me. I had to go back to almost 10 years ago when I was in Montgomery. We were able to do that there. So I had to kind of pull out 10-year-old practice schedules and see what we had done, look at what they had done the year before. Probably the biggest difference is, you can get a lot of one-on-ones. We started doing that towards the end of the year where we would go R1s against their ones. You're not really worried it's scheme at that point, but you're getting good competition. And so that's something that they had done that I was not as used to, that I think is awesome. To be able to get that one-on-one, even if the scheme's not the same, talent on talent, our kids really enjoyed that. We got after it. Obviously, spread teams practices look a lot different than wing tee-ish teams look, although I would say my offense is probably a blend. And so the passing game-wise, we kept the same warm-up they had done. It's called pops, and you're working routes. Well, that's the same. Quarterback's out there throwing those receivers, no change. However, the pod work was different for them. Where now I've got my Y's and B's over there with a coach working down block, all the flavors of buck over there, and then they're going to work, our belly type stuff. And so that's different, where they're going to travel as a pod. Kind of the Y and B will go together, and then the B will go to the receivers, and then the Y will go to the O-line. That took a little bit of work. Then the guards are coming with the running backs to work buck or work belly. And we started running some quick buck stuff. So, a lot of times they kind of knew, though. After about week 3, they got used to, okay, we start off, we're all in our position groups, and then we're going to go to pods, and then we're going to get some 7-on-7 or inside drill, and then we're going to get team. One thing I thought we did really well here, and I got to credit my offensive coaches, they did a phenomenal job of every play was scripted as far as hash, middle of the field, down in distance, red zone. So anytime we ran a team play, there was a huge intentional push towards teaching situational football. We had, I believe, 9 new starters on offense this year. And so a lot of guys, now a good thing is we bring back 9 of them next year, but learning the game, learning this is 3rd down. We don't do this, or this is 4th down. So learning those things was big, and that helped us a bunch. Defensive side of the ball, I allowed them to do a lot of what they had already been doing. Again, when you come in with a guy who knows his stuff, you let him do it, and we'll visit and adjust and tweak for next year. But I thought they did a good job. That was the biggest difference for me, was having kids go one way, because now, we're an hour and a half, you should be able to be done. I believe. Other than that, you're taking way too long.
Now, I'm always curious about this, because I've mostly been at smaller programs where we have a lot of two-way guys. I know Coach Derry has as well. How do you determine what side of the ball got? Like, everybody's a little different. I hear some coaches talk, but nobody ever gets real in depth in it. And I'm always curious more. How do you determine who's one way and what side they're on? And then obviously your best athletes are just going to play 2 ways. That's just common sense. But how do you determine your one way, what side of the ball that one way guy goes to?
Well, I've always been kind of a defensive-minded guy, so usually I would say that, we're going to take the quarterback on offense and maybe take the running back, and then let the defense pick all the skill guys they want, and then we'll go from there. Here, it's a little different, because you've got talent, on both sides of the ball, and so a lot of times it's more of the fit, the fit these kids have. And the good thing for me now is I'm getting them younger. So now I can actually see what our 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, what they look like coming up. So our goal will be from here on, 7th through 9th grade, they all play both ways. They all play both ways, and now they may start on one side of the ball in the games, but they're all going to play both ways. This spring for us at Searcy, they're all going to play both ways, and then we'll make a judgment from there. In today's game, though, usually you can tell an offensive lineman from a defensive lineman. Usually there's a pretty, except for possibly your guards and the wing tee, you can usually say that guy's a really athletic lineman. He's probably going to play defense. That's kind of how things work there. Skill guys wise, I think what they've been doing here is a guy that couldn't catch play defense. To me, we're going to look at guys that can tackle and get after it and kind of go from there. But if you throw the ball, that's a true statement. Some guys are a little different. I've always held the belief that you put your better guys on defense. I think that's when you win championships. And then those guys, because you can always work special packages into them on offense, but let them go over there on defense and change the game.
No, that's not, I mean.
What type of adjustment was it teaching your coaches the pods and making sure that, you got 6 weeks to prepare, you got stuff that you got to do. You're calling an offense, you might want to work with quarterbacks one day. So how much communication did you do throughout the weeks when you were doing your pods? How hard was that? And go on that. I'm curious.
That's, to me, one of the most difficult things of being either an offense coordinator, a defense coordinator, or a head coach is making sure you're communicating what you want. I'm very blessed here, still very blessed. Got great coaches, but I've got to make sure they understand the goal of the drill, the goal of what we're wanting to get done. And I'm fortunate here that they were easy to work with. Hey, what do we want done? Exactly what's the point of this? How are we trying to get this to work? And we actually had 7 coaches. And so we had one coach that did offense and defense. So I'd have to build in the practice plan where he would come to offense for the first part of individual to work with my tight end wings. And then we would be done with that pod work, and I'd throw him back over there to defense, and he'd go work with the outside linebackers. So as a coach, you got to organize that practice schedule where your outside linebackers may be working with the DBs the first 10 minutes or with the inside linebackers. And then when he gets there, now he's got them. And so it just takes a little movement, and it takes a lot of talking. It takes a lot of what do you need as a coach. So part of our Sunday meetings, everyone has Sunday meetings, but we usually end Sunday meeting with what individual drills do you need? And I want the practice schedule in their hand Monday morning or the end of Sunday night where we have talked and we've maximized our individual time. I think as coaches, a lot of times we get the game plan down, rough idea of all this, but then we don't really talk through the individual work that's going to build into that. That's something we really tried to work hard with here.
That's a good point. I'm gonna write that down because that's one thing I did not do this year. And that's really good idea.
Well, the same thing. If you're on offense, I want to know what our defensive guys are doing in their individual. Like ultimately I'm responsible. So what are you doing in your individual time? What skills, and so that's a conversation that doesn't need to be ugly, but it needs to happen.
No, that's a great point, Coach. And kind of going from there is, you're installing all this new stuff. How much of your playbook did you actually get in this year? Like in the grant, obviously there's tweaks every year. There's stuff you're going to throw in, add based off your personnel. But out of what you wanted to put in, how much of that did you actually get in?
Well, I'm a pretty simple guy. So I would say we got probably 90% of it got in. We got our heavy package in. We got our base run game in. The good thing about coming here was, again, you got one-way kids. And that makes a big difference because now you do have more time with these kids. And so we were able to get most of what I wanted in. And then we were able to add some tweaks, because they knew some things. And I'll tell you one thing as a head coach you've got to be good at is to listen. I had some really good coaches who had come from that staff who said, hey, we ran this last year and that may pair really well with this. And that's how we came up with running quick buck the way we did. I wasn't the guy who came up with that. My offensive line guy did. He said, hey, we used to run this. I bet we could run this, pull both our guards and run it like quick. I said, man, let's do that. And play action off of inside zone. That came from my staff. So, a lot of times as a head coach, you got to put your ego aside and you take what's going to help your team win, whatever coach that is. So long story to get to where your answer was. We got most of my base stuff in, but we actually were able to use some of their stuff in addition to it to kind of supplement it.
Now, when you say quick buck, is that the quick swing pass buck sweep?
Right.
Okay. What is the mythology behind that and the purpose? Why do you add that to your system?
Well, what we saw, at Southside, I always had a pretty good running quarterback. I usually would have a thicker kid there that could run it. And our kid this year, he could run, but he was the only quarterback I had. There's nobody behind him. So you're kind of going, we got to be real careful with how much we're going to run this kid. So we got to come up with some ways to run the ball to the quick side, because you can imagine when teams realized he's not going to run it a ton, they're going to just overload the strong side. If you run the wing tee, your answers usually are counter. So we had that answer already in, but we needed an answer that was going to attack the edge over there. At the level we were at, we had a hard time running the jet sweep stuff. And it wasn't bad, but it wasn't as effective as it was at the level we were before. So we said, okay, what can we do to kind of work with that? And O-line coach, I had to say, Coach, we used to run the swing pass, and I think we could do that and pull the quick guard. I said, man, I bet we could pull both guards. If he didn't get there, he didn't get there, but we could try to pull both. And we had 2 pretty physical, willing to block receivers. So I said, well, let's run it just like you run a buck. We're going to block down with everything and kick out with the guard. And we started to see a lot of man-to-man. And so a lot of times there wasn't ever a force player. You block down, the corner would run with the man. Now you're on the edge. And it became a really good play for us. Our running back caught the ball well. So it was a way of us to get him the ball out in space. And so that's kind of where it came from. But, that's a play they had. We just kind of mixed in some wing T blocking with it.
Oh, that's awesome, Coach. And then the other thing I really wanted to hit on, and I mean, is your kind of like single wing heavy package where you ran counter of, because I saw that. I don't know if it was it's like week 3 or 4 of our season, and I sent it to our entire offensive staff. I'm like, this is awesome. Like, what was the? I mean, how much of that did you take from was that stolen more from the single wing aspect, or was it something you would? I mean, all of us have counter in to an extent. Was it like, okay, I'm gonna do more of an overload package wise and running that? Where was that? Where did you take that from? And then kind of, how often did you call it, and what were kind of the coaching points behind that?
Sure. Our heavy, I took that from Southside. We put it in probably 4 or 5 years ago at Southside. It's very single wingish. I mean, it's very much, now we're vanilla with it. We don't put a lot of time into that. So, what I found though, even at Southside was, we were like 95% conversion rate on that. And I said, well, man, if we're that, we need to run this more. So I had a kid probably 2 years ago at Southside that had like 21 rushing touchdowns. Well, probably 19 of those were 5-yard or unders. We'd get in the red zone, and man, our efficiency went from 60%, touchdowns to like 90%. And so we kind of stumbled upon that there. It worked really well last year for me. We were about the same, about 90 some odd percent. We get inside the 20, we're going to score a touchdown. I mean, I'm not messing with a good thing. When we come to Searcy, well, I've got a dude at running back who's unbelievable. So, man, this is going to work with him. I mean, he is a stud. So we put it in with him, and we were inside the 20. I think we were 95% conversion for touchdowns, running that and a mix of it. Now, we didn't only run that, but we ran that a bunch because it's so hard for a defense. You think about it, you guys coach, your defense coordinator, you're probably getting somewhere around 50 minutes of team, to get ready for an opponent. Well, we run the wing T. So probably 40 minutes of that, you're trying to run double handoff and all that stuff, and that looks horrible. Well, then you're going to spend 10 minutes on that set. And probably the only adjustments you're going to make is how you line guys up, because I don't want to practice that, because you're going to have guys getting hurt in practice. And so we started seeing, we had great success early. One of the wrinkles we put in, man, our quarterback was like the best at hiding on the sideline. Because, the rule is when you change formations or you change personnel groups, that you can't just come off the sideline and line up on the sideline. But our quarterback kept looking like he was running off, and he would hide right there. And I think he caught a touchdown. He had a 3rd down conversion. We dropped what would have been a touchdown on one where he was unguarded. And, and I know that's on film, but it hit like 3 times. And so that was a new wrinkle we put in where, hey, at any point, if he's not guarded or you run and they don't cover him, you can just flip it out there to him. So we had that in. The counter is set up because people were just, we've got 3 linemen and then 3 up backs all on the right. That's 6 dudes. Yeah. And when all we're trying to run, if you give us an A or B gap opening, we're probably going to run belly, to that gap. If you cover up every gap, we're probably going to run power, kick out, and wrap up any blitzers. And if you decide you're going to completely overload like people did, strong side, we're going to run the counter. Now, the way we're in the counter, you can kind of see it. We don't pull any linemen because it's everybody's up in there now. If you run this set, they're all right there. So everybody just blocks down. We're going to kick with our 3 back guys, and we're going to run the counter. And we were able to hit that. I think we hit it for a touchdown in the film you're talking about. And actually, our playoff game, we went up 7-0, gotten heavy, and I'd seen on film they were going to overload heavy. So that was our first call, and he kind of walked in from about 5 yards. So counter really gets set up for us. So really, really like that set. It is very much a single wing-ish where it's simple. We had some other tweaks we started running off of because we had so much success with it. But we like the set, obviously, short yardage. We also like the set against those really quick defensive linemen. A lot of times you're getting where you're trying to pull and do this, and you can't get out. Well, you can get into that set and go almost foot to foot and handle those smaller defensive teams.
One thing I want to kind of hit on, really, I'm going to buy you a book on Amazon because I really am a big fan of it, is when you talk about coaching other sports, and when you coach basketball, and I think it's really important for players to play other sports. I think it's almost equally as important coaches coaching other sports. At the end of the day, you might be able to pick up some culture things. Worst comes to worst, But what basketball, I think, I've never had the privilege to coach it yet, but I've always enjoyed it because it is a more chess game than people want to give it credit for. I mean, I think people watch the NBA and give too much credit to, you got a guy like LeBron that can just take over. But you always watch how Golden State, Cleveland Cavaliers did when get LeBron on a Steph Curry or LeBron on a big man. So what are some of the ways that you've translated that into football? I mean, the wing tee is cool. I mean, you got outside linebackers making the play on jet, you run down. You know what I mean? If inside linebackers making the play on jet, you run trap. But like that's all that's fun and games. But how are you able to use your basketball knowledge and coordinating your best players in the best situations on a package on a Sunday?
And that's a great question. And it sounds like you've already read my book because there's an entire chapter about creating matchups offensively. And I actually use Golden State as that example. So that's hilarious. I guess everybody saw what I saw was, how in the world are they going to run a pick and roll and get LeBron on a scrub? I mean, how do you let that happen? As a coach, you can't do that, And so I do a chapter defensively talking about how, defense is pretty simple, but we make it really complicated because we put our system in where we say, hey, we're going to do this. Well, I'm not going to have my outside linebacker man-to-man on their stud receiver. It's not going to happen. So make sure your system has an answer for that. Offensively, it is amazing time after time where if you just teach your kids how to move positions, you can create at least a favorable matchup. They're not always going to win. Sometimes it is guys. They got to make plays. But I don't know how many times this year and in previous seasons we've been able to take a guy and get him one-on-one with no help on a linebacker who's very uncomfortable covering. And then that's the evolution of the spread game. And that comes from basketball. Where I'm going to take a guy. See, football, we can't run picks. We do, but we're not supposed to. But what we can do, motion a guy here to there to figure out what defense you're in. I mean, watch the NFL. That's every play. Running back's out there wide, motion, and now the quarterback knows, all right, you're in zone, okay, or you're in man. Or you take your guy from the backfield. We did this a bunch this year. Take both our guys in the backfield and shift them out late. Well, you've declared your man zero. All right. So now your linebacker just went out there on my kid that runs, 4.6. And so we like that. And we're going to take that, and that's something offensively you can create in the passing game. It's harder in the running game, but you can still do it by shifting and trading. And that's the one thing the wing tee, I think, has ahead of a lot of the spread teams is we can line up tight end wing here, get you to declare, now move, and now running at the guy we want to run at. And so I think are very much, they're universal, but they're very much basketball type concepts. We're going to line up here, we're going to bring you over here, and now we have a matchup.
And I'm very much that way on the defensive side, and I've always found it very interesting. And just kind of being able to adjust on the fly. And I guess the next follow-up question I have to that, how much do you get off script at times?
A bunch. You better. Yeah, you better. Now, here's a little different.
Everyone called me crazy. Like, you put in all this time on a call sheet, and all of a sudden you just get off script on a defense.
But I started scripting formations and shifts with an and/or kind of, like we're going to line up in, let's say we're going to line up in red empty, and we're going to shift this guy over here, and then we're going to run freeze, and then we're going to run this or this. And so that's kind of how the script starts to look for us. Now, sometimes we'll just stay with it because we know what you're going to give us. But, most of the time for me and probably for most guys, I just want a new formation, a new shift the first 7 or 8 plays. And now I feel like we have a good idea of what you're trying to do. And now we can go make adjustments. And so that was big for us. But you better be able to adjust, because any offense, especially the offense I run, I have no idea how they're going to line up. I have no idea if they're going to try to take away. We had a really good running back this year. Good for me. He comes back. I'm excited. He had like 28 touchdowns. Stud. Okay. So how are they going to handle him in space? How are they going to handle him at running back? How are they going to handle him in empty? So that's the kind of stuff I want to figure out. We played a game probably not very long ago. I think we scored 50. We weren't able to win, unfortunately, but we scored 50 because we figured out real quickly, if he's in the backfield, we're getting a loaded box. And if he splits out, they're going to cover him with two. Probably a smart move by them, but now I'm running into a 6-man box. So our second running back went for like 180 yards because we're running into a easy box. And to me, that's the kind of stuff you want to learn as a coach. And you want, not only that, you want your kids to know it. Like that kid came up and said, Coach, you're not throwing me the ball and you're splitting me out. I said, I know, but do you realize they're sending like 2 or 3 guys with you? And yes, sir, I got it. So, I think you want your kids to see that stuff too and understand. That's the other part about basketball coaches that are great is they're able to convince a bunch of kids that have to share a ball to be unselfish. Both of my children play basketball right now. One's 7th grade, one's 9th grade. That's the hardest part about basketball is getting the selfishness out of it. But the greatest coaches do that. And so that's the one thing that as a football coach, I think we have a great advantage is we should have a very inherently unselfish game. And I hope we can keep it that way. And that's one thing we're trying hard to work with here at Searcy and other schools I've been at is preach unselfishness.
No, I agree 100%. About every single one of those topics about being unselfish. I think that's one of the great things about this offense is, whereas I think some other offenses are kind of limited on the ability to be unselfish because it focuses so much on one kid, whereas the wing T offense at times, and even the triple option offense at times as well, it's who's getting the balls based off what we're getting. I mean, I was at our JV game this year with our quarterbacks coach, and they wanted to, I think it was like Oakwood or somebody, and they just refused to let us run jet sweep and I think power. They gave us belly. So it's like, yeah, I mean, we're not going to give our wings the ball on any of these drives, so we just rotate our 2 fullbacks and 8 yards. Like, if you're not, and then they adjust, and then the wing gets the ball. Like, that's the great thing. And it's like, and then the wing's like, okay, 8 yards of pop, I'll lead block on belly. Like, that, and we talk about that all the time. Like, I mean, when our head coach talked awards for kids, we're talking about how unselfish some of our kids were as blockers. The kid that wound up getting our most improved award, that was probably the best thing about him is he didn't care if he got the ball as one of our wings. He just wanted to, he would lead block, reach block. He'd do whatever you tell him to do. And I think that's, one of the best things as a coach that we can emphasize is to be unselfish, to learn to be a teammate, to learn to be able to work together for not only just a sport, but that's a lifelong lesson that you got learned.
Yeah, and it's a difficult as football becomes more spread out and you have these guys that are very dominant players, it becomes harder, to continue to do that. I was very fortunate. Probably our best player was one of the most unselfish kids I've ever coached. And so he, by example, I think, set the tone of, hey, he's not getting the ball, but he's perfectly willing to go block hard for you. He wants to go out and play on defense to make plays. So those are the kind of kids you dream you get to coach. It's not always that way, but you hope you get to coach those kind of kids. And to me, that's the culture, whether you run wing T, you run flex bone, you run spread, empty, it really doesn't matter. Convincing your kids to be unselfish and work hard for each other, that's the key. I'm a big Dolphin fan. Y'all know off air I talked about this a little bit, but Tua came out this week and said something, which by the way, as a Dolphin fan, I'm so excited. Finally got a quarterback. He came out and said, he complimented Jakeem Grant. He said he runs a lot of brother routes. And I said, what in the world does that mean? He goes, basically those are called clear out routes where you're not getting the ball, but you're creating something for somebody else. And I thought, man, that guy gets it. Both those guys get it. And that's where, as whatever you're running, whether it's blocking, running a route off, convincing kids to do that is the key.
I think that, yeah. I think let me rephrase this. I think the more we can emphasize and highlight those kind of actions, the better. Like our offensive coordinator was very big on highlighting unselfish and get after blocks this year. Blocking, not didn't care how much the how many yards the ball went for, the carry, the pass, did not care. So he'd have a highlight film every week, and if you made the highlight film of the unselfish blocks, you got Scooby snacks. They'll just here, and you get multiple bags. It's just like unselfish blocks and just busting and some of it I think it was week 8 against Greenville or somebody. Our tight end backside is sprinting across the field and picks up the safety and it just highlights that you're being unselfish. Ball isn't going towards you. I mean, one, you're not getting the ball, and two, it's nowhere near you, but you're sprinting across the field to cut off a safety so we can get a 20-plus yard run.
Right, and that's the beauty of this offense. We ran a play action pass. I think I put it on Twitter, just a little dump it out to the running back, and I'm just trying to highlight this kid and say, hey, man, it's a great kid for us. He's a junior. We're excited about him. And every comment on there from the coaches was, look at the blocking downfield by those receivers. They had sealed that guys off for him to walk into the end zone. And you can tell what the coaches that get it, what they see. Great athletes come and go, but effort can remain the same.
Yeah. And I kind of want to go back to culture real quick because we didn't really get a chance to talk about it. And you mentioned you had 6 weeks. So how and with COVID, how was that process and work for you in terms of installing the culture you wanted? This is a scheme-oriented podcast. We're talking about wing T, but the culture. We just spent 5 minutes on talking about being unselfish. How was that process? How much did you get conveyed across of what you wanted, not to just your players, but to your staff in terms of the culture, expectations, and what that looked like?
That's something that takes time. It really does. And 6 weeks is not nearly enough time. And with COVID, it was very difficult. I think our kids figured out real quickly that effort was prioritized. They figured out that being where you're supposed to be and doing what you're supposed to do was figured out. But culture takes time, and it takes trust, in my opinion. And in 6 weeks, and then even the season, that's not enough time, And I told the seniors, I was as honest as I could be with them throughout the year, was y'all are in a really difficult position. One, you don't know if we're going to have a season. Two, you got a new head coach. You don't know me. You don't know if you can trust me. So trying to have open, honest conversations with those, hey, I do care about you. I know it's hard to believe that because we just met, 5 weeks ago. But to me, culture is one of those things that takes time. And I won't know if the culture is hit here or anywhere else I've been till 10 years down the road. You don't know if it's stuck with them until they come back to you when they're 25 and say, hey, do you remember whatever. So culture to me is one of those deals that a lot of coaches talk about. But if you can get a good culture in 6 weeks, then that just means you inherited a lot of really good people. I think culture takes time to build.
Okay. No, that perfect, Coach. And kind of as we start heading towards the end of this, I do want to hit back on kind of the process, and it kind of hits on the drills, the practice. How much did this shortened experience alter the process that you use and the process you're going to overtake going next year in terms of spring ball installing your system, continuing to develop your culture, continue to coach your assistants?
A ton, man. It was difficult. I don't know many guys that made the transition from one school to another in 2020 and had a super pleasant experience. It just has been COVID has been very difficult. Now I'm fortunate that I'm with good people. I'm very blessed with who I'm with, but it's hard. It's very difficult to get stuff in. When I took the job, we still were at that point where we couldn't touch each other or be around each other, and so you kind of had about 4 weeks worth of, are we even going to have a season? And so that was difficult to get the excitement up and where we needed to go. So off season wise, I am very excited because it's going to be a lot more time to be around these kids and be around the coaches. I do think you can do some things. To me, you have to do what you've got to do. But 6 weeks for us, we were very, very focused on just trying to be fundamentally sound on both sides of the ball. We were emphasized tackling a ton on defense. Try to emphasize effort. Offensively, the same thing. Is not going to look perfect, but let's try to learn what gap down backer means, learn what coming off the ball hard means. We're not going to be as low as I want us to be 4 years from now, but can we be lower today than we were yesterday? And 2020 to me was the ultimate test of literally one day at a time. We wouldn't know until we got on the bus if we were going to play that Friday, because I think we might have been one of only a few teams in our conference that played all 10 games due to COVID or due to other situations. And so to us, we tried to take it one day at a time. As a coach, that's hard. Y'all probably know that. Like, I want to look long-term where I want to get and where we're going to go. But reality was, with this year, you had to kind of go one day at a time, try to maximize what you've got in that one day and work forward from there. So hopefully, as this COVID stuff, hopefully the vaccine, hopefully all that stuff will move it away and we can get back to normal. But to me, it definitely was a testament to our kids, to our staff, and to any coach that went through this year of it truly is one day at a time. And it may not be the experience you wanted, but I'm so excited. We actually got to play 11 games of football. And I know a lot of coaches would have given a lot to be able to do that.
You hit the nail on the head on that, man. I think it's just such a bad year, but we out of 11 games we could have played, we got 7. But just to see our kids compete 7 times was more than any kind of sacrifice that I had to make throughout the year. And I was talking to a good buddy of mine, and in just kind of the education world, how hard it is right now. And I said, the best part about this, it can weed out the bad coaches. You imagine if you were just kind of a selfish coach in it for the wrong reasons, man. I think it's could be a blessing in disguise, getting a lot of the selfish coaches out of it, because this was about as hard as year as I've ever had to coach. Granted, I'm pretty young into it.
It's been tough, like I said, and it's been tough everywhere. Every coach, if they're sitting down there honest, this was a difficult year, and some guys did a great job navigating through it. They're still playing here in Arkansas, and so hats off to those guys. They did a better job than I did navigating through all this stuff. And so, but like you mentioned, when you look at a big picture, our kids got to compete, they got to play, and as frustrating as some things might have been, it really forced you as a coach to try to focus as much as you could on the positive things.
Well, yeah, perfectly, Coach. And kind of the last thing I got for you, because I'm always curious about this, and I ask about everybody I talk to, whether it be on or off screen. With you being the go-to guy for the gun tee stuff, I think you're about the universal gun tee resource. Since you can't really go to yourself, who do you go to pick brains? And like you mentioned, some of it's basketball related, which is fine. Everybody's got their resources. So who do you go to, and how do you go through that process of adding to your program? And it doesn't have to necessarily be just offense, because you as a head coach, you're in charge of offense, defense, special teams, culture, fundraisings, etc. Who do you go to, and what does that process look like?
Sure. Well, my wife's sitting across here probably laughing because, as I pretty much talk to a coach every night. I got a lot of guys that I respect. Some I know in real life, and some I just know this way or Twitter way or Facebook way, but I've got a lot of guys that like Rick Stewart, I think, Roger Holmes. If you want to learn wing tee, those are guys that, and they know their stuff. Probably they know the blocking stuff probably better than I do. They're very good at that. With us looking at potentially going even 20 personnel next year, don't take my card away. I'm having to find guys like, spread guys and go talk to them about how they do certain things. And so to me, you're always learning as a coach. Randy Jackson's a guy out in Texas. If you want to learn a little bit about culture, a little bit, he's pretty good at that stuff. You want to learn about DB stuff, you got Cody Alexander out there in Texas. He and I talk a lot about preparation and keeping things simple. We have a big belief system of, I think sometimes as coaches, we want to look smart, so we overcomplicate things for our kids. And I think he and I are in the same mindset. So a lot of times I'll go to him about, different coverage type things or preparation for practices. But, a lot of times I go to my assistants, and ask them, because they know the kids better than I do. So if it's a relationship type deal, or I'm having a hard time reaching this kid, I want to go to them, and so a lot of times we want to look up for advice, but the reality is a lot of times you can actually look down for advice. And I hate to say down, look down on anybody, but I think you get the point of what I'm saying is talk to your assistant coaches, or how about this? Call in your senior leaders and talk to them. Hey, what do you think will work? Do you want buy-in? Make sure everybody knows they have a real voice of what you're doing. We went for it on 4th and 1 once this year, and I asked kids what they wanted to run. They told me the play, and it worked. And so, but you want to have buy-in from the kid. Now you're going to limit it. We're not going to run reverse back, but hey, we're thinking this or this. What do you guys think? Hey, we're going to come out this next drive. We're struggling. What play do you think? We started off the game, and our playoff game ran a double reverse pass. Well, I asked, hey, y'all want to do this? Hey, let's do it. Well, it worked. So getting the kids to buy in. So you hit it. You want to ask up. There are some gurus you go to, and man, you want to get scheme stuff. They're unbelievable. But also the people around you who know you can probably give you a pretty honest evaluation too. And I'll say this too for the coach that might be listening. I was scared to talk to college coaches. Like I was, and you still kind of get nervous because they're on TV, so you get a little nervous. But those guys, man, they want to help the game grow. And a lot of times they will take young coaches. Now they're busy, but they will take young coaches under their wing. They'll talk scheme with you. If they realize you're doing it out of genuine motives, not just trying to get in the good graces with them, but they'll bring you in and talk to you. And football coaching community as a whole wants to help each other. And I think 2020 will further that, because I think we all know this year was tough. And so we all want to help each other as we work forward.
Oh, I agree 100%, especially on that college coach aspect. Like this offseason kind of made me stop caring about in terms of like how they thought of me asking them for advice. Like I just stopped caring about that. And to your point, I had some really good coaches privately just here. Like, coaches at Tulane, at Louisiana, what was it, Lafayette or Monroe, that were just good guys who, even at Colorado, like would just talk to me off screen, just be like, yeah, what do you need to know? What do you want? What do you need help with? What are you doing? How are you doing this? Here's maybe some ideas how to make that better. Like, and I think that's great. And I think you hit the nail on the head though, in terms of relationships with your kids. Like, the assistants are kind of in the trenches, and
yes,
they probably know them better. And that's not always true, but relationships vary here and there. But yeah, there's certain kids on our team that I have an extremely well relationship that maybe other people won't have with. And same thing with Coach Derry. Coach Derry does a fantastic job developing a relationship with his inside linebackers. Like, if question, like, or if I need to get a hold of them, I usually just text Derry, like, can you talk to so-and-so about this? Or how do you think? Yeah, like, so I agree with you 100% on that. And I think that would be a good way to end this, is just the positive. I like ending on positivity, especially right now with all the COVID stuff.
I don't enjoy the aspect of it before we get. Is that what I liked about it? Is I spent a good amount of time talking to a few college coaches, and now I'm able to watch the college game and learn, because now I know exactly what they're doing. Like, who are their keys? What are they reading? And understanding, was it a scheme issue or a player issue, and how offenses are attacking that. So I think that just watching college football this year, I've actually learned more than just being more casual about it. I've actually been able to look at it from a standpoint of like, oh, okay, this is how they're attacking it. Everyone runs cover 3, cover 2, but there's different variations of it and different reads, and how our offenses and defenses are attacking it. Honestly, I think the best thing you can do is ask a college coach if you can, because then you actually watch them compete against each other, and now you're understanding why they're calling it. And I thought it was the best learning tool I've had this year since COVID.
Yeah, those guys are great, and you want to get humbled. I got called by a few of those guys, like not high up, but asking about, hey, how do you run buck? And I was like, I thought y'all knew everything at that level, But it's a humbling experience. But all it is we're just sharing with each other, and that's coaches that want to learn and want to get after it. And there's a lot of football coaches in this country, but I'd say you're probably dealing with 20%, 25% that have a high drive passion, that this is what they would do even if they didn't get paid. and I think those are the guys you want to be around.
Well, here I'll add to your humbling experience there, Coach. I will just say I've talked to numerous coaches over the past 6 months in the college ranks, and the ones that have installed wing T related concepts, whether you're gun or under center, have bought books from several certain coaches. One of them is you.
Oh man!
I'm not going to put names out there, but to install either the gun or under center versions of the wing T, because their head coaches says we need to figure this out. And I think one of my favorite stories is one of those coaches brought their GA over because he was the O-line coach, and they ordered pizza, read several chapters of books, and then drew them up. So just if you want it. You and a couple others
let
are
them
on
know
that
I'm
list.
available. I like pepperoni pizza, so come on whenever.
So we'll end it there. This was another episode of the Got Down Bagger podcast. In the bio will be information for Coach Simpson, as well as breakdown of each section of the kind of this podcast. If there's specific stuff you want to go back and listen to, but his Twitter, a link to get his books if you want to do that. Again, like I said, his contact information. Again, you can also find Coach also on, if you are on Facebook, the Shotgun Wing T and Understand Wing T. Coach posts a lot of stuff on there and is very helpful to our coaching community. So don't hesitate to reach out to him. I think I message him once every couple months, and it might be football related, it might not be. It's a good time talking to Coach, and then the next couple episodes we'll talk belly pass. I'm just gonna keep the preview for that short. Because I just have had fun this morning. So, Coach, thank you again for coming on. We appreciate it. And this was another episode of the Gap Down Bagger podcast.